Good morning again. We are back. I'm Cliff Kelly. This is WVON 1450 AM, the Talk of Chicago. It is May 2nd, and we are more than pleased to have in our studio some illustrious guests. Gentlemen we all know and just love what he does. Call me. I felt so honored and say, can I come on your show and talk? I said, what's the old saying, Brother Ishmael? Do a bear crap in the woods? That means yes.
I never heard that.
Yeah, Conrad heard that before. Yeah. In another way, however. There's another, I'm cleaning it up. But the answer was unequivocally yes. We're always honored to have the leader of the Nation of Islam, our wonderful brother, the Honorable Min Farrakhan. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Cliff, and peace to you and peace to all of your listeners. Happy to be here with you, and with me this morning is, of course, Dr. Conrad Worrell of the Black United Front, my international representative, Brother Akbar Muhammad, and our regional minister and my assistant, Minister Ishmael Muhammad. Mm-hmm. We are honored to be in the same studio with you.
Well, I'm so pleased to have the four of you here. I was just talking to the international representative. We are going to Ghana for the 50th anniversary of their independence. We were there for the 40th, and that was the time when Ghana Airways couldn't get us back home. and your glorious international representative helped us a lot, took us to his home and took us various places, and he was 3 additional days we just lived off of him. So hopefully now, Ghana Airways, you've straightened that out, is that correct?
Yeah, they're not in existence anymore.
That's good. They weren't in existence then. We just didn't know it. We're going to talk about a number of things. Obviously, immigration and the rally that took place, your visit to Cuba, and just the situation with the covenant. I have to tell you, I just thought you were wonderful. I called and left a message on the covenant. When they got to you and you started speaking, people were trying to get away. It was the funniest thing. You were speaking the truth, and some people, what was that in the movie? You can't handle the truth. A lot of people can't handle the truth, Brother Minister, and I just want to tell you that the things you said at the covenant, the hearing with Tavis, I thought it was fantastic.
Thank you, my brother. I'm glad first to be here to discuss it, because there was some misunderstanding, and I didn't want anyone to think that Minister Farrakhan would disrespect the sincere, committed work of Brother Tavis and all those who worked with him to produce the covenant. Mm-hmm. Naturally, it's a working document. It's not a perfect document, but it is a wonderful base to launch from. And so I thought that today we might discuss the misunderstanding and give it clarity, and then go on to whatever you would like to discuss of the international scene of Cuba.
Great.
Or the wonderful, wonderful demonstration yesterday of our Hispanic family. I was so very proud of them, to see them standing as they have never stood before, to shake America and to let America know that we are here. No matter how we got here, we are here. And although America likes to call them aliens, maybe they don't see themselves as aliens. Maybe they see themselves as coming home to what was once theirs, that by clever design was taken from them. Arizona, Texas,
was part
California.
of Mexico.
Right.
Right. I think, though, when we look at that, Brother Minister, I see so many more people who are represented in that group that certainly would not fit into what you're saying. All the Koreans, all of the other Asians, the Chinese, the Eastern Europeans who are working here. And one of the major problems I have, quite frankly, particularly with the Eastern Europeans in my community, they are doing jobs that the brothers ought to be doing and would be doing, except that they are not union, and these developers and construction companies can hire them at a lesser cost. I'm talking about carpenters. In fact, we had one gentleman there who was speaking. He's from England. He certainly does not fit into that group you're talking about. And what is he doing? He's a carpenter. Now, we've got these black folks out here who can do all of that sort of work, and they're being excluded because of many of these people. I have a major problem with that.
Well, Cliff, I know that what you're saying is absolutely true. Pharaoh has really let the black man go. It is we who have not let him go. The Mexicans that are coming into the country, they say illegally, many are doing jobs that we wouldn't do, but there are many that are doing jobs that we would be happy to do, mainly in the building trades, in the road and construction business. But the powers that are controlling this want cheap labor to build their bottom line, but they don't want us because we are union. They forced us.
Right.
We became union. Now they don't want us because they would have to pay us. And then the racial thing is deep. I went to the movie the other day to see the picture Sentinel. And it was interesting to me that in one of these rich homes, when you opened the door, it would usually be a Hattie McDaniel type. If you saw the butler, it would be one of us. If you peeped in the kitchen, it would be one of us. But when the door opened, it was an Hispanic woman, and the cook was Hispanic, and the chef, the butler was Hispanic. So actually, Pharaoh has let us go. And the job opportunities that are there for us are the highly skilled jobs. And even there we are suffering, but the masses are being herded into criminal activity that we might fill the jails and institutions of this country. But they have really let us go, Cliff.
The highly skilled jobs, again, and you're absolutely correct, Brother Minister, but then when you have the educational breakdown that we have fewer, particularly black men, who get the opportunity to be trained for those highly skilled jobs. You just saw the other day headlines, 6.5 out of 100 students, 6.5 that go into the public schools as freshmen in high school finish college. 6.5, and that's all. That's including white. So when you talk about African, and I'm sure Dr. Worrell knows this, it is horrible. But you know, we had a caller the other day, yesterday, that said Latinos aren't taking our jobs; they're being given our jobs.
That's correct.
And they're being given our jobs because it's not that blacks don't want to do those jobs. Vicente Fox is totally wrong. It's that they can't afford to do those jobs at that cost. Because these people will do it for half of what an African American would have to do to even live under the poverty level. So this is Fox, of course, doesn't want to see this happen because if those people who send all this money home, which is greater than the Mexican GNP, you know, then they're going to ask him, why don't you create jobs in your own country so everybody's not trying to get out? He's getting more money. He has every reason not to want to see this work. We got a major problem here, and I have a problem with us being so. I want to see how many Mexicans are going to support reparations movement.
Well, we need to ask.
We sure do. You have to ask for. I support them. You know, I believe in reciprocity. Now, I know of your Caribbean ancestors and all, and maybe you look at it a little differently than I do, but I'm not feeling this. I want to tell you straight up. I got some major problems. so we'll discuss this, okay? We'll be right back. Stay with us. We are so pleased to have these illustrious gentlemen in our studio, and we'll be taking calls, too, at a point. We're going to talk about Cuba, continue on immigration, and also the covenant. I'm Cliff Kelly. This is WVON, streaming live at www.wvon. We are continuing with this wonderful group of gentlemen in my studio. Of course, the leader of the Nation of Islam, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. With him also is Dr. Conrad Worrell, also the international representative, Akbar Muhammad, Mr. Akbar, and also, of course, Minister Ismail Muhammad, and thank you all for being here. We started off talking about the situation with the immigration crisis. Brother Minister, let's get right into the covenant, because you started off by saying you wanted to clarify some things relative to that, the covenant with Black America.
As you may recall, Cliff, I started my talk by quoting something that Harry Belafonte had said to me and written about the last days of Dr. King. And for those in our listening audience, maybe 2 weeks before Dr. King had passed, SCLC had met the leadership, and they were planning this move in Memphis. And there seemed to be great joy among the disciples of Dr. King. But Dr. King was in a very melancholy state, and Harry went over to him and said, "Dr. King, everyone seems so joyous, but you seem to be quite melancholy and somewhat removed. What's troubling you, Martin?" And Dr. King said, quote, "I fear that I am integrating my people into a burning house." And he wanted his disciples to be firemen. And the thing that I think they misunderstood is when I said, "No, let it burn." Now, Dr. King did not see a literal fire, because there was none. But yet the house was burning. Dr. King didn't start the fire, so he knew he was not the pyromaniac, if you will. And the government of America didn't necessarily start burning their own house. So what started the fire? This is what I was trying to get the audience to see when I mentioned the Son of Man coming out of the east and Jesus saying he was the light of the world, and the light of the world is actual sun, and the sun is actual fire. And so when John was baptizing with water, he said, "There's one coming after me that is going to baptize with fire and the Holy Ghost." That fire is the presence of a truth that would set on fire an institution and the worlds that are built on a false premise of white supremacy. So that house now is burning because of the presence of truth. Christianity is no longer what it once was, because black theology now is moving in. The house is burning. The educational system is no longer what it was, because black intellectuals are seeing what is wrong with the system, condemning it. So we are not firemen. Every time we open our mouth, we are pouring gas on the fire. Tavis is not a fireman. Tavis is pouring gas on the fire every time he critiques a system that is unjust, because white supremacy is at the core of it. Injustice is at the core of it. So that's, I mean, when you say burn the house down, my babies are in the house. Well, my babies are in the house too. But if the institutions of America are burning, then what I'm saying to us is the scripture says, behold, I make all things new. And what God is calling on us to do, coming up out of slavery, coming up out of injustice, he is giving us a wisdom that would allow us to set up a new educational paradigm, a new political paradigm, a new spiritual paradigm. And we don't need to join into that is on fire. We need to do that which is new and introduce that to the house, but let that which is burning burn and help it to burn, because out of the ashes will come something new and better that will give us the justice that we cannot get under the present system of things. That's what I meant.
And you feel that many did not understand that?
No, I think the people did understand.
I think so too.
But I think
That's why
that
I'm asking.
maybe Brother Tavis, Brother Cornell, and Brother Harry, they had such an investment in the covenant that maybe they thought I was dissing the covenant when I said that black people can't make a covenant with each other until the covenant that we've made with hell or with death is broken. We live a life, as the Bible said, there's a way that seemeth right unto a man, but the ends thereof are the ways of death. We are not faithful to what is in our best interest. So when people are lying to themselves, and a covenant is based on an agreement between parties who want to exercise truth. So until we break this covenant with the lifestyle that we live, break this covenant with the white supremacy system, break this covenant with a world of death and destruction to us, then we can't sincerely make a covenant with one another. And then lastly, Cliff, I heard all of this talk, but I never heard God mentioned. And I think an affair of such great resolution as what we are proposing, God somewhere has to be present in order for it to be successful. I don't think the covenant should be made with each other before we make a covenant with our Creator. And that's why the Bible gives the covenant: if my people, which are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, forgive their sins, and heal their land. That, to me, is the first step in the covenant. We got to come out of the madness that we're in. Then we can be trusted when we give our word to one another.
Sounds good to me. We'll be back. Before we take the break, I am sorry that certain people did not understand that. I agree with you. I think the audience did, because the people I talked to certainly understood it to the point where they were questioning, particularly one beautiful brother, Mr. Belafonte. For him to say what he said, I think surprised a lot of people, because they understood what you meant. And why those on the panel didn't, if they in fact didn't, I don't know why. But I'm glad you have the chance to clarify.
After your break, maybe I would just come back and, if I have time now, I listened carefully to Dr. West and my brother Harry and Tavis. These are men that I not only love, but I admire. But I think that if we had sat down and dialogued, I was not a part of the formation of the covenant. So I could not be relied on to be a rubber stamp for something that I admire the work that you do. But what I don't want us to fall into the trap of is depending on the liars and deceivers who have constantly promised us and broke our promise. Tavis held up two papers, one from the Democratic National Committee, one from the Republican National Committee, letters of commitment. And what I was trying to say, and I think I said it clearly, that these are not people in power. You are not dealing with the real forces that run this house. Even if you sat down and talked with President Bush, you're not dealing with the real power of this house. He's got to go back behind the door and talk to the real boys. And that we never meet. That's why the Bible said, we war not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and the rulers of the darkness of this world and spiritual wickedness that's up in high places. And as long as those people are not uncovered and brought out, then we can make covenants and agreements on lower levels and wonder why nothing that the government says they're going to do for us do they ever finally do.
Stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment. Minister Louis Farrakhan, of course, and also joined by Dr. Conrad Worrell, Minister Akbar Muhammad, and, of course, Minister Ishmael Muhammad, all right here at WVON, streaming live at www.wvon.com. Continuing with this wonderful group of gentlemen in my studio, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, the leader of the Nation of Islam. We have with us Dr. Conrad Worrell, Minister Akbar Muhammad, and of course Minister Ishmael Muhammad. We're pleased to have them all here. We were just talking about the covenant, and I believe Brother Akbar, you wanted to say something.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just want to say first, Cliff, thank you very much for having us this
Absolutely.
morning. But I just wanted to say, listening to Minister Farrakhan, I was blessed to be in Houston with him that day, and I watched the audience reaction. The audience were on, but those on the stage, except Naeem Akbar, who did not go along with what they were saying and tried to show them exactly what the minister was saying and where he was going. But those who were quick to make that kind of judgment of what he was saying was thinking, as an old Southern saying goes, when we meet together and plan something, what are white folks going to think about this? So if their mindset was, what are white folks going to think about what Minister Farrakhan just said, then they reacted instead of thinking about what the brother said and looking at that massive audience that was in front of them. And this is how they respond according to the way I saw it, Cliff.
And I think you're right, Brother Akbar, and then you have to think about who was sponsoring it.
Yes, we saw those names in those companies up in
That's
back.
right.
And the very fact that this is why, Cliff, in my opinion, that if we have something good that's for our people, we have to have the strength, the courage, the tenacity of will to support what we believe in so that we can strengthen our leadership. They don't have to go around begging and worried about the sponsors they have, but we have to support it to make sure that we keep it alive.
That's exactly right.
And this is why, Brother Cliff, I proposed at the 10th anniversary of the Million Man March that Katrina unmasked governmental neglect of black and poor people. Katrina showed not only that they don't care or didn't care, Katrina shows that they still don't care. Our government spent over $100 million to make sure that Iraqis in America could vote for something going on in Iraq. But when you have all of these evacuees in 44 states, Reverend Jackson and others were appealing to get some kind of satellite voting, something that they could participate and make the election in New Orleans real. But it fell on deaf ears. So I felt and feel that unless we set up the mechanisms within our own community to deal with the things that confront us, then we cannot expect the former slave masters' children to do for us what we are unwilling to do for ourselves. Education, as you mentioned when the weather and whatnot was coming on, our children are dying in an educational system that has literally run its course. This educational system is unqualified to govern, guide, develop the minds that are being created in a technological information age. We have children that are 2 years old that are computer literate. And they have to go to school and listen to archaic methodologies, things that are stretched out so long that they could have gotten the children to the end of the season in the first week of school. So the children become discipline problems. And that's why I suggested that we need a ministry of education where we gather our black intellectuals and come up with a system of education and take our children out of something or get control of what they're in and put something there that feeds them. We need a ministry of health. The covenant outlined magnificently the health disparity of black people. Hospitals are closing in the inner cities all over America, and black people who want to be doctors, if you don't have the money, then they give you grants. But by the time you get out of medical school, you're $150,000 to $250,000 in debt. So you have to join a system that sucks the blood of the poor in order to maintain yourself. And so this is why, Cliff, we went to Cuba, because we saw in Cuba that here's a man, Fidel Castro, that for 46 years has lived under an embargo and under the threat of imminent invasion. Not only does he live under the threat of hurricanes, but here's a man that has survived over 640 attempts on his life. Here's a man that came to power whether you agree with his ideology or not. I'm not dealing with that. I'm just dealing with the facts of what has happened on the ground. If, when he came to power, 90% of the island was illiterate, and now today there's 100% literacy, and every Cuban child has a guaranteed education from preschool through college. Every Cuban citizen is guaranteed health care. There's no such thing as health insurance. The government looks after the health needs of every one of its citizens. There are no homeless people in Cuba. Their home may be very substandard according to what we would live in, but they're not living in cardboard boxes under bridges. So I ask myself, if this man has done this, and he's not a Christian, and he's not a Muslim, but I saw more Christianity practiced in principle in Cuba, and I saw more Islam practiced in principle than among any Muslim nation, I felt, or at least among most Muslim nations, that let me go there, let us go there from the Millions More movement and study disaster preparedness, because it's clear that our people in New Orleans were not prepared, and we're not prepared in Chicago. If an earthquake shook Chicago, or if a hurricane came, or disaster came, how are we prepared? So we went down to see how we could, through the churches and through organizations, take what we have learned, put it into practical principles, and teach disaster preparedness and disaster management to our people.
Excellent. We'll talk more about Cuba and also, of course, the covenant and immigration and other issues with our distinguished. So pleased and honored to have in our studio the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, the leader of the Nation of Islam, and he is accompanied by our good friend Dr. Conrad Worrell, also the international representative for the nation, Minister Akbar Mohammed, and also the assistant to the minister, and a gentleman just does such a great job, particularly when we talk about education, Minister Ismail Mohammed. And we are going to take calls in just a moment, but before we do that, I want to go to Conrad, a little bit about education, and also you were on the trip to Cuba.
Right. Brother Akbar, under the leadership of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, how many people were in our
23 at our delegation.
We had an intense experience because
Should have been 24.
it should have been 23. But I might say that it was Cliff. It came to me in Cuba that in 1959, when I was a senior at Hyde Park High School, my history teacher introduced our class to the Cuban Revolution and the issue of literacy. Now, I'm 17 years old. I don't realize that 47 years later, I'm going to be in the delegation with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and the issue of literacy comes back into my consciousness because he introduced that to us as a senior in high school. Well, Cuba today is the most literate country in the Western world, so it's hard to compartmentalize Cuba and say that education is over here and education is over there, because the whole island is an educational enterprise. And we had an opportunity to visit many of the key educational institutions in Cuba over a several-day period from, I believe it was Minister Akbar, March 19th, culminating in a meeting with Fidel Castro himself,
Beautiful.
who said study should be a way of life. I mean, that just got me. And he also said that it was the Europeans who stole from Africa all of the great tenets of civilization in the world. So there was indeed an inspiring trip because we visited the School of Arts and Culture. We visited the black man who's over the Supreme Court in Cuba. We had an opportunity to visit the School of Public Health, the Eye Clinic, the community cultural centers. We had a meeting with the Cuban Five, which is a whole nother issue. And as a matter of fact, it's a black man who created their disaster and defense strategy in Cuba. So when the hurricane hit Cuba, they lost nobody. It was a black man who created this that we met with in a smaller meeting. So we also met with some of the athletes and the sports and recreation university where where 1,000 athletes were being trained with 500 trainers. And you might remember, Cliff, the boxer Stevenson, this beautiful black man, and the sister who won the 800 meters and who, after that, I believe it was in one of the Olympics, when she came back, she was cooking in her kitchen in Cuba and caught on fire, and she was 7 months pregnant and lost her baby, but she came back a few years later and won a silver medal in the 800 meters, and we had an opportunity to meet with her. The point is, Cuba was an inspiring experience in terms of looking at a small country of 12 million people that has produced 70,000 doctors, that has doctors around the world providing places in the world that wouldn't necessarily have medical services. And this was, and I guess the black students, the 88, I believe it was, black students that we met at the Latin American Medical School. One of them went to high school with my daughter. And the fact that we have been charged now to help recruit more black students to medical school in Cuba as a result of the offer by Fidel, who has in fact made this offer over the years, and under the leadership of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, I think we're going to try to intensify this campaign. So it was a trip that showed us what people can do with little or nothing, and fighting against the system of white supremacy in the United States government and an embargo that attempted to take this country down. And in fact, the influence that they have in the Caribbean and South and Central America, the relationship that Fidel has with Venezuela, the fact that Condoleezza Rice came to where was it? The country we were in for a half a minute before going into Cuba.
The Bahamas.
Bahamas, and was trying to get them to stop relating to Cuba, and they said we can't do that. We have students going to school in Cuba, so education cannot be compartmentalized in Cuba. The whole island is an educational experience, and so I was honored, learned a lot. We're going to write a lot about this, and we're going to be working with the minister to help spread the word relative to the offer of Fidel for black students from this country who want to go to medical school for free. And and not only that, if they can't speak Spanish, before they enter the medical program, they spend a year in training and learning Spanish because the curriculum is in fact in Spanish.
Sure, of course it would be.
Let me just add
Akbar.
to one thing I have to say. First, it's 4 months intensive Spanish when they first get there. But the school of social work that we went to,
oh, yes,
which was unbelievable, because here they had the problem of a lot of young men and women in the streets, unemployed, and with this drug being floated into Cuba. And so they decided to go into the streets, take these young teenagers and early adults in their early adult years, bring them into the school of social work, teach them what is needed in the society, give them courses. And these were young people. The director that talked to us was 25 years old.
Yeah.
And then send them back into the street
As social workers.
as social workers to
That's
help
great.
in their society.
Let me
And
ask
one
this,
other point on that, Cliff. I have a master's degree in social work from the University of Chicago, you know, whatever that means. But I have never been so inspired. The second principle of being a social worker in Cuba is that if you find someone in the community doing something wrong, you do not turn them in to the police.
Yes,
Now that just
that
blew
was-
my mind when the young man told us that there were several principles in the training of social work. And the idea is you don't turn them into the police, because what you do, you turn them into turning them around. And so over a short period of time, 5 years, the School of Social Work has produced 10,000 social workers from the various provinces in Cuba, as Akbar mentioned, who are going back now working to try to organize and turn around some of the negative behavior.
Akbar, just quickly, before we have to take a break, as Conrad mentioned, this embargo is continuing. Every nation that we trade with, all of our friends, trading partners, trade with Cuba.
Yes.
We're the only ones who don't. So why continue this ridiculous practice?
Well, let me say, Cliff, first of all, I think that Cuba being 90 miles away from America, 12 million people, it's a consumer market, but the very fact that the Cuban Revolution has survived against America and has tremendous influence. America is continuously seeking ways to cut the Cuban revolution off and hoping for the evil accident of time that they can change the government. So they're waiting for Castro to expire. Once he goes, they feel they can turn it around, and they have to keep the embargo in place so that when he goes, they can say this is a new relationship with Cuba now.
But Brother Akbar, I just heard, and we asked Comandante Fidel, is it true that you have discovered oil
Yes.
off the north coast of Cuba? He said yes. He said other things, but
Yeah.
that we won't talk about now. But on the news a few days ago, a U.S. senator was saying there are 4.5 billion barrels of oil under the water off the coast of Cuba. And Fidel Castro has invited the Chinese, the Canadians, and the French to exploit that gold. So the senator says, well, my God, It's only 90 miles from our shore. And these people are not technologically as advanced as we. Why, they might damage some of the shelf under there. So it doesn't make any sense for us to continue this embargo.
Who said that?
A U.S. Senator. I can't remember his name.
I believe that.
But
Let's be friends, right?
They're talking now about let's rethink this, because 4.5 billion gallons, barrels of oil under the sea that America could exploit rather than China is a very interesting leverage for Cuba.
I hope Fidel tells them exactly where to go. And Conrad, I bet you that black man in the Cuban Supreme Court is not like the black man in the U.S. Supreme Court.
Well, we asked him how many prisons there were in Cuba. He wouldn't answer the question. He said, "How many people in prison?" He said, "None of our business." He was an illustrious intellectual and knowledgeable of international law at the highest levels, quite inspiring. And one of our members of the delegation, Burby Powers, one of our upcoming attorneys in the city of Chicago, was our point man in this interaction, and it was just interesting to see.
The thing that amazes me about that, too, is Guantanamo. It's right there on the island, of course, and the prisoners that are being held there, and Amnesty International and everybody else is talking about the way we are mistreating prisoners there. Unbelievable. We'll be back in a moment. I promise we're going to take calls. Also, we're going to talk about Iraq. Stay with us. We'll be back. I'm Cliff Kelly. Good news for you. The minister and those accompanying him have stated that they will remain here until 10 o'clock. So, if you other gentlemen have something planned, forget about it. No, that's great. But the minister said, we got to take some calls because he wants, so let's do that, and then we'll go with Brother Akbar on some international things that I certainly have an interest in. Mike, thank you for waiting.
No problem.
Are you there?
Yes, good morning. This is Mike calling from Houston, Texas.
Oh, Mike from Houston. Good.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you, sir?
Well, and assalamu alaikum to you, Mr. Minister.
Wa alaikum salam, brother.
And I just wanted to call to let you know that I think you are the most brilliant visionary that Black America has in this country today. And I love listening to you. No man on earth catches my attention as you do. And I've been a fan of yours for 35 years, and I just love to hear you tell it like it is. Unlike many people today, we don't really have any leaders anymore in the African American community other than yourself, as far as I'm concerned. And my comment to you today is, please, would you comment on the state of Black America today?
Mike, thank you so much. Sure. We really appreciate not only your call from Houston, but holding on as long as you have. We appreciate that.
Have a great day, gentlemen.
You're wonderful. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You want to take another call?
No, go right ahead. Just an important question,
Well, the state of Black America right now is very, very grave. In fact, Black America is on its deathbed. And if we don't do what we need to do as quickly as we can, we could be in 10 years almost extinct. The enemy is working night and day to destroy us as a people. And all we need to do is look at the condition inside the inner cities, the level of destruction that we are wreaking on ourselves, the self-hatred, the gang conflict, the loss of job opportunities, the closing of factories, the sending of our jobs and the jobs of unskilled labor to cheap labor markets overseas, the influx of drugs, the opening of prisons and putting prisons on this stock market, and people investing in our degradation, the developing of black millionaires, becoming millionaires by calling our women bitches and whores and glorifying the savage life of our existence, using, for instance, the young lady in North Carolina, our dear sister, who is a woman that wants to get ahead in America. She's in school trying to get an education to feed her children, but I heard that she was a part of an escort service, and here she has to go into an all-white lacrosse team and shake herself to entice men that have always disrespected the black woman. This is the degraded condition that we are in. Our politicians, for the most part, and I'm not, for the most part, have bought into the lie that America works. And they know that America does not work. Our rich and our powerful have been made rich and powerful as buffers for the real rich and powerful, that we could look at them in their bling bling and their fine homes and whatnot and believe that America will work for us. And at the same time that this is happening, our women are being taken from us. They are the most educated. They are the most disciplined. They are the most visionary. So they are filling the schools, and the rate is 70% black women, 30% black men. And all of the diseases that are afflicting our community, we lead in cancer, lung cancer, we lead in prostate cancer, we lead in ovarian cancer, we lead in AIDS, we lead in all of the destructive things. This is not by accident. This is by design. And this is why the minister is crying out to us. But it's like a voice crying in the wilderness. I don't know how long God has for me among you, but I know America is falling. And this singing and dancing and shaking our backsides is only blinding us to the storm clouds that have gathered over America. This economic system could collapse at any time, and the dollar that we've killed each other for, destroyed each other for, will be worthless, and there'll be anarchy in America. And then the same helicopter gunships that you saw the Israelis flying into Palestinian refugee camps, you see them flying in the hood in Chicago on the west side, in Watts, in Harlem, because this is the time that they have let you go, but you don't want to go free. And so now they've purposed to destroy you. So the last thing I will say on this, and I'm sorry to be so passionate, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and I'd like you to, when you refer to me, say that he is the national representative of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, sitting in the seat of the leader of the nation of Islam. That describes me better and makes me more comfortable, Cliff. But let me say this. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, when the sea takes a body down and gives that body up to the surface for those who love that departed person to go find that body, if that body is not retrieved in time, then the sea destroys that body. America has given us up. We floated to the surface, but there's nobody to claim us. So the sea is now destroying black men, black women, black children. And unless we wake up the pastors, wake up the politicians, wake up the so-called leaders, and wake up the masses, then our destruction is already in the door. And I close. Look, we deserve to be chastised because we've heard all the great preaching, all the great leaders, but we have done nothing of what they have said. So when Farrakhan passes off the scene, you will look at me and say, what a lovely song. But when I'm gone, you will say, wow, a man of God, a prophet, a messenger, somebody that represented the messenger of God was among us, but we didn't pay attention to what he said, and now we're paying the consequences of the rejection of truth. It ain't on the white man no more. It's on us. The white man has dumped you. Now get up and let's do something to help ourselves, or go down to destruction, and it will be exactly what we deserve.
Wow. All right. We'll be back. Stay with us, Annette. And we continue with our in-studio guest. We are so pleased to have him, the representative of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Minister Louis Farrakhan. See, I'm trainable. Akbar Muhammad, the international representative of the nation. Brother Minister Ismail Muhammad, of course, the assistant and also the regional director, and we love him. And, of course, our good friend you just heard talking about education in Cuba and other things, Dr. Conrad Worrell. And the minister is going to stay with us, and we're going to take some more calls right now. And Doris has been waiting, and you're next. Doris, good morning.
Good morning, Cliff, and good morning to the wonderful gentleman there today, Minister Farrakhan.
Good morning, my dear sister.
You know, Minister Farrakhan, this morning, my heart is really hurting. I've heard everything everyone has had to say. I didn't go to the immigration march, but I did go to the march about Darfur. I was so hurt and so disappointed to see that the majority of the people out there standing up and bringing attention to what's happening to our black brothers and sisters in the Sudan were white. The overwhelming majority were white. And I was just incensed because I kept asking different people out there, where are our clergymen? Where is the black community? Where are most of our black politicians? They were not there. They were not there. And Minister Farrakhan, you're absolutely right. We're going to go down. Why are we not shutting down the Dan Rhine because we don't have a lot of brothers and sisters working out there? Why are we not surrounding dailies, the city hall by the 300,000 and 400,000 as the Hispanics did yesterday because we only have 8% of the contracts? Why are we not in our communities going after our little young brothers and sisters and telling them we will not tolerate this nonsense anymore? Why are we not setting up grocery stores in our community so that the Arabs and the Koreans who have basically taken over, I can't go buy any products for my hair unless I'm buying it for Koreans. I came up in Jackson, Mississippi. I grew up in a segregated community. Everybody, every business person in that community was black. That is my background. And it hurts me. It hurts me deeply because I don't see any future not only for my grandchildren but for black children, period. Why are we not surrounding the Board of Education and saying to Michael Scott and Annie Duncan, you will not close these schools and expose our children to the violence because of the gang warfare?
Doris, you've asked a lot of questions. I think we get the message.
So that's all I'm saying.
All right.
We talk, but what about the plan of action?
Gotcha. Thank you so much, Doris.
My dear sister, as your heart is hurting, so is mine, and I'm sure so many hearts are hurting, particularly those of us who have lived our lives and struggled to make life better for ourselves and our people, and we see ourselves, and it looks as though our work and the work of all the great ones who have sacrificed before us has been in vain. It has not been in vain, but that is the way it appears. When Lou Palmer one of the great voices that we've had in this city could be knocked down in the street by a young black man and robbed. And when Lou could say to that young man, "But I'm Lou Palmer," and the young man cursed and said, "I don't give a so-and-so who you are." When somebody could break into the home of Rosa Parks and slap our sister or rob our sister, when the elderly cannot walk the streets and find peace in their twilight years, we have come to a place where God has to step in, and the chastisement of God will be severe. There is a reason why many black people were not at that march, and we need to look at that seriously. There is a great humanitarian crisis in the Sudan, no question about it. And if you notice, they call it genocide, the killing of innocent life. But there's a deeper current running up under this, and that's why you saw what you saw, because there's a geopolitical, economic current up under the cry of some of these white people over what's happening to black people. 3.5 million blacks have died in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, nobody saying nothing. In northern Uganda, the Lord's Resistance Army mutilating children. Nobody speaking about Uganda. Why is the Sudan so important now? I have never spoken publicly about our role, Brother Akbar's and mine and the nations, as an emissary of peace between the government of Khartoum and the people of southern Sudan. If you look at the language of a Zionist-controlled media, the Arabs are killing the Africans. They're Arabic speaking, but they are black like the people that they're killing. But now, if you go to Washington, if you go to New Orleans, they told me when I went to see the devastation, they have a brown bag test that if your color was darker than the brown bag, there were certain places you could not go, and it was your own people doing this to you. It wasn't so long ago in Washington, D.C., when the lighter skinned black had privilege that the dark-skinned black didn't have. And this is real among us. Even today, this sickness exists. Now, go to Darfur. Go to Sudan. You have Arabs that conquered and Arabized that part of northern Sudan and mixed their blood into Africans. So many of the Sudanese in Khartoum and Umdurman and in that area, they look just like you would be on 63rd and Cottage, the range of color. But many of them feel themselves to be Arab. And there's a disdain almost for saying, I'm an African. So in the southern Sudan, you have blacks that are so black till there's a streak of purple almost in their skin, but they are beautiful black people, but they're animist, they're Christian, and they're Muslim. But the Arab North that is black feels superior to the animist Christian South. So the benefits of the riches of the Sudan, they never shared equally with the southern Sudan. Thus, they had a 20-year civil war. Akbar was with me, and he's here to bear witness. I met with Kenneth Kaunda, the former president of Zambia, who went with us. I met with Jerry John Rawlins, the president of Ghana at the time, and they sent us to Kenya to meet with President Arap Moi. And he was over that area in the peace work between the southern Sudan and the government of Khartoum. I then went to Kenya, then we went to Uganda, where we met with President Museveni. And we had a 3-hour meeting with Brother John Garang, his wife, and members of his inner circle. At no time did that man mention slavery as an issue. When I brought up the question of justice, Garang's wife broke down and cried because I was the first man to come in that area and mention the principle of justice. It was justice that they were seeking from the government in Khartoum. And I left there and I went to Khartoum and I spoke with Omar Bashir, and there was about to be agreement, but America stepped in because they did not want any credit to come from us in America making peace in Africa. So America stepped in and they forbade us. Is that right,
That's
Brother
right.
Akbar?
That's exactly right.
Now, in Darfur, in the southern Sudan, there's oil. Just like there was in eastern Nigeria. And when the West sees a chance to separate you from oil, and they can control what they separate you from, this is the geopolitical drama that sits under the tribal madness that the West manipulates for their own purpose. They don't give a damn. Hear me well, Black America. They don't give a damn about the suffering of Darfur. If they did, why are they inflicting that kind of suffering on the Palestinians? I've been to Israel. They got roads that Palestinians can't travel on, that only Israelis can travel on. They live under apartheid in Palestine, and these same forces were the architects of apartheid in South Africa, and they are the architects of Jim Crow in America. They don't give a damn about your suffering, but they will use your suffering for their political purposes. Now let's get to the real drama. Oh, I can't.
I'm sorry. Hold on. Hold on 1 second. Continue. Just in a moment. We'll be back. We are pleased that the representative of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who said, we want to stay with you if you will allow it. And we said, oh my goodness, yes, so we can get to more callers. And of course, I'm talking about the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who likes the music, right? He loves the music. He is here with Minister Ismail Muhammad, and of course, Minister Akbar is with us, as is Dr. Conrad Worrell, and we're just so pleased to have all of you. We're going to take another caller who has been waiting for a long time. Glenn, thank you. You're on WVON.
Good morning, Minister Farrakhan and the other guests on the panel.
Good morning,
Good morning.
my brother.
Thank you, Glenn.
Minister Farrakhan, brother, I've been following you for a number of years, and I have the utmost respect for you. I thank God for WVON, and I thank God for you, and I pray to God that He keep you with us many, many more years.
Thank you.
Minister Farrakhan, I think that if more of us in the black community, as well as the politicians in City Hall, Springfield, and in Washington, if they would follow your lead, I think we as a people would be much better off. One other, Minister Farrakhan, as far as the job situation with the Hispanics versus us, granted, we do have ills in our community, as well as in other communities, they have their ills too. But I do know of instances, Minister Farrakhan, where there have been requests that Hispanics be hired over blacks. I know of 3 instances, and these are personal experiences that I've had, that Hispanics do be hired over black people. And for one other thing, Mr. Farrakhan, in order to become a citizen in this United States, does one not have to enter this country illegally? Thank you for your time, brother, and I appreciate listening to you.
And Glenn, we appreciate you, and particularly for holding, all right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, we entered sort of legally.
The transatlantic
The transatlantic slave trade was legal.
Yeah, we came tourist class.
But there's a big question as to whether we have ever been real citizens.
That's a point.
See, if you go and study, according to what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us, the ancient dictionaries of what is an American. An American are those of European descent, and an American truly cannot be any member of the aboriginal people of the earth of which we are. That's the original definition of what an American is. So they have always treated us as un-American. That's why we were called second-class citizens. And respectfully, brother, yes, they want to hire the Mexican over you. And they want to create hatred between 2 elements of the poor community. They are a part of an indigenous population, as we are, so pit us against each other. But if we could find ways to strategically ally, then we can work very good to end a lot of the suffering that we have. But while I'm on this, I want to say to those who went to Darfur, most of those who went are very sincere people.
To the rally.
To the rally, I'm sorry. They're very sincere people. I did not wish to or mean to denigrate the sincerity of the whites who went and the blacks who spoke, because they are definitely hurting from a genuine humanitarian crisis. I am addressing the rulers of the darkness of this world and the spiritual wickedness that's in high places that manipulates populations over humanitarian suffering largely created. Now, what is in that western part of Sudan? There's more oil.
Oil.
There's more gold.
Uranium.
There's uranium. So if we can separate Darfur like we tried to do Biafra, like we tried to do the southern Sudan, now John Garang became a vice president in a new government and unfortunately died in an airplane crash. But now the problem is going on in the West. Let me show you something, if I can, with the help of God. What is Tom Lantos? Are you really concerned, Senator Lantos, with the black suffering? I don't think so. Elie Wiesel, are you really concerned with the suffering in Darfur? Or is there a geopolitical economic agenda that is Zionist? Let me see. Let me see. Bush cannot be concerned with the suffering of Darfur when he has rained down shock and awe on innocent people in Iraq who died by the tens and hundreds of thousands. This is to deceive the masses who are genuinely concerned with human suffering. George Clooney is concerned. The girl that the Chinese girl, Lucy Liu, she is concerned. Obama is concerned. Those politicians of ours that were out there that went to the Sudanese embassy, they are concerned. But there's a geopolitical drama here. See, the government in the Sudan is an Islamist government that is not a friend of Israel. And if they have the wealth of the southern Sudan and the wealth of the western Sudan, and justice is at the base now, and you can unite the tribes. Because in the old West, you had the sheep herders, and you had the cattle raisers, and you had the railroad coming through. So you had the sheep herders fighting the cattle herders, and the railroad people coming through taking land, which produced this kind of family squabble among so-called Americans. Same thing is happening in Africa right now. You have farmers, you have herdsmen, you have tribal conflicts that are being exacerbated. I sent my brother Akbar there. He visited the government in Khartoum. He went to Darfur. Did you go to Darfur?
Yes, I
Would
did.
you talk just a minute about your trip so that they can see?
Let me take one quick break.
Yes.
And then we'll come right back to Brother Akbar, and he'll talk about Darfur, because we wanted to discuss that anyway. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Let's go to Annette, get a quick check on the traffic and the weather, and we'll be back. And also, we'll be taking some more calls, and we also want to get to Iraq. Stay with us. We'll be back. We're discussing world issues, of course, with our wonderful group, and we're going to go right back now because the minister had asked Minister Akbar to talk about being in Darfur.
Yes. Thank you. Cliff, Minister Farrakhan sent myself and the delegation really to Darfur because of the controversy. And at the root of the controversy, how it was perceived in America that there were some Arabs. And when you say Arab in the American context, you think of Saddam Hussein, you think of Mubarak, you think of the president of Syria. This is the way you think of an Arab. But they said that Arabs were killing black Africans, and it was genocide. And that's all they put out. But they never went to the root of the problem. The root of the problem was a rebel group in that area that when the ink was dried on the agreement
In the South.
in the South that Minister Farrakhan mentioned with John Garang, when the ink was dried, an attack on the Sudanese government came from the West. Now, there's many stories about different political groups, and they attacked the Sudanese government. The Sudanese government was at loss. They just finished the war in the South, cost 2.5 million lives lost, and so they went into Darfur, and they sent soldiers in there, and they also built a militia among the people there, not only among what is called the Arab tribes, but among the Africans also, because this rebel group were hiding in the villages. Now, this doesn't go out to the American public. You don't get the picture of the real root because they don't even talk about the rebel groups that started the conflict in Darfur.
By attacking the Sudanese government.
That's right. So what was interesting, when we flew into Al-Flasher, the capital of Darfur, now remember, Darfur is as big as France. Think of the size of France. That's how big Darfur is. Sudan is surrounded by 9 African nations. It's the largest land-based country in all of Africa, and it is very rich, not only with the oil that they found in the south, but they have gold. They grow, the gum arabic comes from the Sudan exclusively. They have tremendous sugar. And also in Darfur, the one thing, they have oil, uranium. If you can remember, the war with Libya and Chad was over the uranium.
Chad, right.
That's all in that area. And then they have tremendous cattle. They have the ability to grow crops, but they got water under the desert floor. Enough water to give water to all of the Middle East. It's a part of the water that Gaddafi tapped out for the great man-made river in Libya. And this water is of value now because 50 to 75 years, the Middle East, and Israel in particular, will need water.
Yeah.
And also, the minister said it right, it's an Islamic regime that came to power in 1989, supported Hamas and Islamic Jihad, gave them a base there, plus Osama bin Laden was there. So the objective is to have regime change. If you cannot have regime change, break the country up, put them in a civil war. While they're fighting, you'll be extracting oil out, as they did in Angola with Savimbi and the government that was in power.
Who is a Janjaweed?
The Janjaweed is really a new term. It means jinn or devil on a horseback. Now, when they went in to get this militia, it was the Arab tribes. Now, what makes the difference in an Arab and an African in Darfur? This is key. Emily West from the Washington Post last Sunday said 5 truths about Darfur. And if you can go online and read it, you should read it. 2 things she said here that's very important. Everyone is black, and she has it in big letters. You can see it there. And so in Darfur, if you're thinking that there's some Arab tribes that went in there and killing black Africans, that is the first untruth. I mean, it's an outright lie. I was sitting in a big conference room, and our host said, would all of the Arab stand up? These included some of the Janjaweed and so forth. Would they please stand up? They stood up, and I looked. There was not well, you would be an Arab there. If you went, you would be an Arab, or Minister Ishmael, or Minister Farrakhan. But all of them were black. Then he said the Africans stand up, and then the Africans, all of them black. And they said the distinction between the Arabs and the Africans in Darfur is that the Arab tribes only speak Arabic, and they're the herders. The African tribes speak an African language, and they speak Arabic. And the other thing that people don't see is that it's 100% Muslims. There's no Christians there, there's no Buddhists, there's no Jews. Everyone in Darfur are Muslims. So this conflict there is rooted in the rebel group. So to root the rebels out, the government armed militia, and they may have made a mistake because they picked up an old beef, the old beef that Minister Farrakhan was just mentioning, the herders against the farmers. When the dry season comes to the north, the herders, and these are 10, 20, and 30,000 head cattle, they begin to move them south, and they eat the crops of the farmers. And the farmers fight them, and they fight them back. It's been going on 500 years. So when they got armed, they start taking up old beef. We are against suffering of any people. But what Minister Farrakhan said is absolutely correct according to what's happening. It's a political agenda that our innocent people in America are victimized in order to unseat the government in Khartoum or have a regime change.
And of course, we don't get that information, Minister Akbar, and we've discussed this many times, is because the Western press is totally controlled.
Absolutely.
Even if they wanted to tell the truth, they couldn't.
But one thing that Dr. Conrad Worrell just mentioned is that this is African Liberation Month. Years ago, we had information coming from Africa, the ambassadors at the UN, and there was a flow of information. Now, the only information we get of what's happening in Africa is filtered through the Western press, basically. And we don't have the kind of flow of information to inform our people properly.
And the same way, the intelligence gathering sources in America victimize members of Congress to make members of Congress go along with a policy that they had drafted that was based absolutely on a lie. It's the same way they filter information through the media on African leaders, African governments, and they determine who the rogue is, and then they whip up the American people to see that as a rogue. This is a genuine humanitarian crisis that we should be involved in, but we should not allow our passion for the suffering of humanity to allow us to be used by these wicked arch deceivers who want to use our love for peace and justice and truth to have regime change, to put in Khartoum a regime that would be favorable to what is going on in Israel and what is going on among them.
We'll be back in a moment with more. Stay with us. And we are back, and we are so pleased to continue this conversation. I want to go to Minister Ishmael Muhammad, because he has something I'm sure we want to hear.
Thank you, Cliff, and I know that everyone in the listening audience has thoroughly enjoyed this discussion, as I have enjoyed it immensely, and we're very grateful to have this opportunity, and just want to say to our Chicago community and to all of our listening audience how grateful we are and should be to have the airwaves of WVON and to have such a great communicator in Cliff Kelly to have us here. We, Cliff, and to our listening audience, will be organizing and hosting a town hall meeting at Mas Mariam, God willing, in a few days, and we're asking all of our listening audience to stay tuned to WVON, and we will announce this town hall meeting where we will present our findings and what we learned of immense value from our visit to Cuba. and we hope to present that within a few days. We want to show pictures. We want to present also to the community the entire delegation that went to Cuba, and all of the video and the pictures that were taken during our visit. So stay tuned.
We certainly will. You let us know as soon as you get a date.
Thank you.
That
Thank
is
you.
fantastic.
Let
I
me
love
say
it.
something.
Yes,
This,
Dr.
by way
Conrad.
of history, this is May 2nd. This is
Yes.
the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's birth month. It's also Malcolm's birth month. It's also the month in 1963, May 25th, that the Organization of African Unity was formed under the leadership of Kwame Nkrumah, and the 50th anniversary next year
Yeah.
of the Ghana's independence gave rise to the African independence movement. At the same time, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was formed in this country. A lot of people don't know that Dr. King was at the inauguration of Kwame Nkrumah. So what is coming to my spirit right now, with the minister being so passionate up in here and firing up the world, is that at one point in this history, when Kwame said Black Power, we went off into another thing. We were supporting the armed struggle in Mozambique, Angola, and Guinea-Bissau. We formed the African Liberation Support Committee by 1972, May 27. We organized a major demonstration in the nation's capital saying we are an African people, yo ho 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 ho, Black Power. So we had African Liberation Day marches, rallies, and parades all around the country. So the question is, who organized that march down there for Darfur? And we've gotten away from organizing our own demonstrations in support in behalf of African affairs on the continent of Africa, so we can shoulder a little responsibility. We used to march, Cliff, on the west side. We had thousands of people going into the Golden Dome for African Liberation Day annually every year. So thanks to the minister, thanks to Akbar, thanks to WVON this morning, we've started the African liberation discussion, and now we need to get in the street and organize our defense of our people wherever they are in the world. Because, and matter of fact, South Africa came on the heels of this. Namibia came on the heels of the African liberation genesis that came out of the 1960s in support that black people supported.
Excellent, Dr. Worrell. Thank you. Brother Minister, one thing that you did, and it turned out that you were totally correct, Minister Farrakhan, you wrote Bush a letter saying if you invade Iraq, it's going to be a major mistake. You said a lot more than that. Obviously, what you said has unfortunately become a reality. He did invade Iraq. We have major problems. It's continuing. One of you mentioned earlier the economic, the economic problems we're in right now. If China called in the debt, we'd have to close the government. A lot of people have no idea how bad off we really are. What, in your opinion, is the circumstance now relative to this illegal invasion of Iraq, what it has done to us internationally, and how do we get out of this?
I don't think there's a way out. What President Bush has done, he has ushered in the rapid pace of the fall of the greatest nation in the history of the present world. He can't get out of Iraq. He went in thinking 3 years ago in May that the mission was accomplished. 3 years later, and nearly 2,400 American soldiers dead, several thousand wounded that will be afflicted for a long time. Many of the soldiers from this country that are there, even when they come home, they will be afflicted by diseases that they are showing signs of now because of the dirty bombs that America dropped on Iraq, poisoning the water with uranium, depleted uranium, and the food. And now American soldiers are in that environment, breathing that air, and they're beginning to show signs of great suffering. I've read recently that the real reason that America went to war with Saddam, knowing that there were no weapons of mass destruction, was that when the oil for food program was announced, Saddam Hussein, instead of using dollars, which all oil in the world is traded with U.S. dollars, Saddam Hussein said, no, you can only get oil out of here with euros. And because of that, there was a depression or a slight recession, not a depression, in the United States of America. Now with the price of oil per barrel going up near $75 a barrel, Iran now is saying they are going to establish an Iranian oil bourse, B-O-U-R-S-E, which means that oil from Iran will have to be bought with euros. Now the Middle East may go along with Iran, and Russia chimed in the other day. If you remember, Gorbachev spoke of the arrogance of America in the fall of the Soviet Union and the way they have treated the Russians. Well, now, Russia may go along with this Iranian oil bourse and trade in euros. Now you have China, you have Japan, you have Korea, which have tremendous reserves. So what could happen, as you rightly said it with the question, if China decided to use some portion of what they have in foreign reserve in American dollars, turn it into euros, and Russia did it, and Iran does it, and other nations follow suit, America's economy will collapse.
Doo-doo, as Harold Washington
and
used
so
to say.
America has to unseat the regime in Iran because they're not interested necessarily in nuclear bombs, but they have a right to nuclear knowledge and technology, and they are pursuing that, and they don't care what America says or what the UN says. I hope to be going into the Middle East soon, and I will be encouraging the Muslim world. Since Condoleezza Rice says that Iran is now isolated, no Muslim nation should be isolated with a vast Muslim world when Iran has done nothing against international law, and Israel is sitting south of her with untold amount of atomic weapons, nuclear weapons. If Iran does have nuclear weapons, then people got to come to the table. Right. It produces detente. The Arabs have nothing to deal with Israel with militarily. So Iran is the thorn in the side of Israel and a thorn in the side of America, but Iran would be stupid to get a nuclear bomb and drop it anywhere, for the retaliation would be so swift and so thorough that Iran would not exist as a nation. So Americans, you must not be blindsided by Iran and weapons of mass destruction for the second time. Once should be enough.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment. We'll have some closing statements from our wonderful guests. And we are back and closing out a wonderful, wonderful conversation with four wonderful gentlemen. You know, one thing about Minister Farrakhan, he said, Cliff, take calls, take calls. I'm going to try to get in another call. We have guests who don't want to take any. He says, take as many as we possibly can. But we've had so much to talk about. If we can, we will. But I want you to say something to address the brothers that are incarcerated, because we have a lot of them who listen.
Very briefly, Cliff, first, thank you so much for having us. And we want to thank the brothers and sisters who are under lockdown. We know that the prison cell does not define you, nor does the number that you have to constantly go by define you. Prison is a place of gestation, like a womb. And as you outgrow a womb, if knowledge is in the prison as light was present in the womb, you grow so that the womb can't hold you anymore, and once you leave, you can never come back to the womb that bore you. So it should be with prison life. Let knowledge come among you. Don't you serve time. Let time serve you. And we will put knowledge among you and let your mind feed on that knowledge, and you will grow so that prison cannot hold you. So that when you come out, it will be like coming out of the womb. You can never go back except for a brief visit.
It's wonderful. Listen, I'm going to ask you to address this. I'm not going to go to the caller, but Dennis, who has been waiting, his question was sort of a carryover from what our friend from Houston said. Mike said, what can we do? Can you close us out with that, Brother Minister? What do we do? We heard Minister Ishmael mention there's going to be a forum about Cuba. We can learn a lot from that. But, of course, what can we do?
We have to turn inward. We have to realize that we are not poor. Nearly $1 trillion will come through our hands, according to what some of these economists say, but it goes right out of our hands. We are disconnected from each other, and the sad thing about it is when a good idea comes through any one of us, others of us that the idea didn't come through feel envious, and so we work against each other rather than working with each other for the benefit of all of us. I think the time has come, and our suffering should teach us that we need each other, and we need to unite and pool our resources intellectually and financially to begin to do something for ourselves. For as the door of America closes, and as the door of Asia closes on America, the lifestyle of the American people will begin to diminish, and the standard of living of the American people will begin to fall, and in that regard, we also will suffer greatly. So while there is time, let us be wise. Let us not be, as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, like the butterfly who plays all summer long, not thinking about winter, and when the first cold blast comes, the butterfly is dead. Let's get busy now while there's time and do something to help ourselves. May God bless each and every one of us to rise up, unite, and do for ourselves.
The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, my good brother, Dr. Conrad Awaro.
Thank you for having
such
us,
a great job. Our international.
I must say, Cliff,
Sure.
before you go off the air, we said in Cuba, we made a pact that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan would not talk about our trip until he came on your show.
That's right, absolutely.
That's
and
right.
thank you. When he called me, he said that. No, they want to do
We
it in
all
New York.
wanted to talk, but we couldn't
do it
talk.
here first. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And in fact, we didn't mention an offer that was made by President Castro, but we'll get to that.
We'll make it at another time.
That'll be great. That'll be great. Brother Akbar, thank you so much for being here. And Minister Ishmael, a pleasure to see
Thank you.
all of you. I want to thank Keisha Shavers, who is our Director of Station Relations, for setting all of this up. Thank you. Jerry Riles, our producer. And, of course, stay tuned because the Roland S. Martin Show will be here in just a moment. Roland will have another great midday show for you. And we certainly appreciate all the information that was disseminated today.